Okay, so I don't know what the sound quality is going to be like on this. I've never used this application before, but anyway, wanting to record something like this for some time, but haven't had the space or necessarily the motivation or the right mind frame, perhaps, to proceed with it, and I kind of give a good depiction of what I'm actually wanting to talk about. But now I'm ill and burnt out, and so as such, I'm in a reasonably good state of mind, I think, to do justice to the topic at hand, which is antinatalism, and more broadly, what the nature of being is on a most fundamental level, apart from all the societal constructs that we just bog everything, the whole experience down with, and really just muddies the waters and distorts the true picture of how things are. So I guess a good place to start is just to make the simple assertion that being is a very bad thing. There have been times when I've believed this to be true more wholeheartedly than others, and there are times when I tend to be a little more conservative in making such a bold assertion, and sort of, in some sense, try and play the devil's advocate with my own conclusion on that matter, and try and argue my way out of it. And this has never been done in being influenced by a positive emotional state where I've tried to do this. Try to be as objective as possible when I do that, and of course I'm very aware that even when I am in a good state of mind, that it's just it's a fleeting thing. It's not really something stable that you can build anything upon and say that, it's, to draw conclusions about the way things are on the basis of fleeting emotional states is always going to be, well, it's going to lead to inaccuracies in terms of, you see what I'm saying, I think, I hope. So basically I try and see how could be wrong about the conclusions that I've arrived at, and the only thing I can say is that the human perspective it would be incredibly audacious to assume that the human being can know all there is to know about reality. Maybe it does. Maybe this is all that we see is all that there is. But it's perhaps more prudent to assume that all that we see is not necessarily all that there is. It's one way of looking at it anyhow. And so though life may seem from the human perspective to be brutal and pointless, and unjustifiably so, and that it's better to have never been brought into this. It's possible that there is a justification for it, but it's out of our reach to comprehend at this time, or entirely. But of course, then we could say that we reject that because of the extent of our suffering. We don't feel that it's justified. And of course, also, you could also look at it as that in some past time, unbeknownst to us, we made a decision to participate, which I consider to be entirely unlikely, but we have to entertain that idea, perhaps. So that's one way that I potentially kind of negate this position that life is unjustifiable. The second that I found is that there's no free will, and it's sort of not really up for any kind of debate whatsoever. From science has demonstrated that decisions are made in regions of our brain that are unconscious to us before we consciously know that we're making a decision. But beyond that, just on a simply experiential basis, we can clearly see with even the slightest bit of probing or examination that we don't possess the capacity to choose as we sort of believe that we do. So obviously one way of to demonstrate that is that we don't choose any of our preferences. We don't choose the parents we have, the places that we were brought up, schools we went to, food we were given. All of this shapes us, and the things that shape us will in turn shape other things that will shape us, and so on and so forth. So there's a kind of almost entirely hard determinism at play. And so when we look at it like that, it's no one chose to conceive me as a child, or anyone else has chosen to conceive anyone, and anyone who's been conceived goes on to choose to conceive others. It's just, that doesn't exist as a possibility. So everything is sort of very, looked at in that way, is very mechanical, and people are just simply these little units of awareness strapped to this ride that is completely beyond anyone's control. which is kind of terrifying. And that terror is kind of something to really, if you want to kind of know what existence is, we should really examine that, I suppose. And if we want to, be in line with the truth, anyhow. And I suppose, that's where I have kind of arrived at, really. Fuck. And, people would like to, some people anyhow would like to think that religion or spirituality can sort of soothe us in some way, or be the key to finding some sort of solace amidst this dark truths that we may feel that we've arrived at when we examine reality. And of course, if someone arrives at such conclusions, are unlikely to be satisfied with what is on offer from mainstream organized religions, the Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Islam, and even more just sort of mainstream conventional Buddhism and whatnot. They're more likely to be drawn towards things like Advaita, or even just the more stripped down Neo-Advaita, or just non-duality. I know I was, and the thing that it sort of seems to point to is that obviously that in the clue is in the name, that reality is non-dual. There are no people or things or separate objects. It's all sort of ultimately the dreaming of a single unit of consciousness that encompasses everything. And it dreams all of this because it is completely eternal. There was no beginning to it, and nor will there be an end. It's this empty awareness, and ultimately all of this is dreamt out of boredom. There's no point to any of it whatsoever. It's just diversion, a dream of dissecting itself to distract itself from the horror, you could say, of its own existence, the horror and ennui of just being. And like a lot of these people that get into this non-dual thing, they seem to, when I say the word, but I'm going to mispronounce it, but I'll try and say it anyway. They anesthetize themselves, seemingly, with this philosophy and outlook, and it seems to work very well for them. But from what I can observe, that seems to be because they say that the nature of this consciousness, the essence of it, is love. And it's love that is the fundamental principle of all that is, but I would just say that it's a dull emptiness, this rattling, hollow void, just sucking void. And there's something incredibly horrifying about even even just from the more positive take of these non-dual people, this fundamental consciousness of just this equally terrifying, which may sort of prompt someone in the direction of a more Gnostic outlook on it, like that the nature of existence is fundamentally malignant from the bottom. I mean, this is not. This is sort of a bastardization of actual Gnosticism. I mean, it's a very broad umbrella term encompassing a lot of different sects, and so when people say Gnosticism, they could be talking about any variety of things, really. That's another topic altogether, perhaps. But anyway, from the way I look at it is that just it's a sort of Ligottian, referencing Thomas Ligotti, Ligottian sort of Gnosticism, and that just from the bottom right on down to us, it's just top to bottom, it's just all horror, and there is no real escape from any of it, even in death, because there's nowhere for us to actually go. I mean, sure, we, as these individualized consciousness that we currently experience with this specific identity and memories, will be erased, more likely than not. But ultimately, what we fundamentally are, there seems to be, at least in this construct, there's nowhere for it to go. There's no escape whatsoever, because there is no boundary to any of this. There's nothing to be stepped over into. You can go very deep with these sort of contemplations, and when I speak of it right now, I speak of them in a very sort of detached, just intellectual fashion. But if you can really sort of experience the reality that these words and concepts point towards to us, an incredibly horrifying state that can be engendered. And anyhow, those are just some thoughts I have about antinatalism and the nature of being, and what perhaps the problems are with antinatalism as being regarded as a sort of like a social movement that can have any kind of impact. Kind of rambly, maybe the point I'm trying to make is sort of not entirely clear due to that, but yeah, more just some different things to contemplate, and yeah, that's about it really.